All right, awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli. I'm gonna teach you about Vue.js today. We're actually just gonna be getting started with it. So don't worry if you don't know anything about it. After today's lesson, you're gonna have some idea and be able to start and code and build something in Vue. All right. So the agenda for today is I'm going to talk about what's Vue.js real quick, why Vue.js, prerequisites, Vue CLI, installing Vue, how we can create apps. I'm going to walk you through a ToDoApp that I built before. I might show you, we might add a feature to it to kind of just see how it works. Then at the end, we're going to build and deploy to GitHub pages, and that's going to be it. Also, feel free to use raise hand feature on Zoom. I see the list of participants, so whenever you raise a hand, I'll be able to see and answer your question if you have one. All right. So Vue.js is a front-end framework for building reactive UIs, user interfaces. It's one of many of them, along with jQuery, which is like the oldest one. Then we have Angular, React, and Svelte, upcoming one. Obviously, I'm not biased for Vue. It's pretty easy to get started with comparing to other ones. It's fast and lightweight. It helps you build powerful single-page applications, and it uses virtual DOM. If you're not familiar with that concept, it's basically it's implemented by libraries in JavaScript on top of browsers APIs, letting you have a reactive user interfaces by keeping like virtual representation of your DOM that tied to your state, and whenever the state updates, that like in memory DOM gets rendered. Okay, prerequisites to learn Vue are you should have some JavaScript fundamentals, you should have some idea about ES6 module syntax, high order array methods, like for each, map, filter, reduce, setter, arrow functions, fetch API, and promises. This is like basic requirements. There's different ways you can include Vue in your project. You can just add it from a CDN and just kind of work on it, inject it in your current page. But the better way to do it is Vue CLI, which lets you spin up a project with all the plugins and tools and bundlers, whatever pre-configured for you. Everything so everything works smoothly, and all you got to do is just start writing and building the app using component structure, which I'm going to talk in a few. So to install Vue, make sure you have Node.js installed. If not, go to Node.js website and make sure you have one of these, either current or latest long-term support version installed. Once you do that, you're gonna have npm package available. So after that, you can run this command, npm install -g at Vue CLI. And once that's done, you're gonna be able to create a Vue app, Vue project using this command, Vue create, and for today, it's gonna be a ToDoApp. So I'm gonna show you that. I already have a ToDoApp running, But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new, to show you how it works in the terminal here. So basically after you install Vue and Vue CLI, you have this Vue binary available. All you do is you run Vue create and the name of the project. And it's going to create a folder within your current folder with the project structure and files. So I'm just going to go one folder up and I'm going to run Vue create Vue app. And what it's going to do, it's going to ask you to pick a preset. I would say go with default for now. In the beginning, you can hit enter to select it. It's going to start installing all the required files and everything. And once it's done, you're going to end up with a similar folder structure, or, like right here. So node modules folder, which comes with every time you install a node package, you're going to have this folder, and you want to have it in git ignore file, so you never commit it or push it to your repository. All right. So I'm going to get rid of this newly created one. And I'm going to continue with what I already have. So then you have a public folder. This is where you're going to have your pre-built HTML file with ID tag, with a div that has an ID of, say, app, where your future app, where Vue is going to pretty much inject the app or render the app during the runtime. Okay, and then we have source folder. This is where all your files or your assets and components lie in. So we have assets folder. You can place your images. You can place your, I don't know, icons, whatever you want, those kind of files. Then you have components. I'm going to talk about components in a bit. We have main.js file, which is where it all starts from. We're creating new Vue instance, which, as you can see here, it's going to mount in that div tag with ID app. It's a default. You can change it, I guess, but there's no reason, honestly. Then we have some gitignore configuration files for like Babel, package.json, and a README. All right, so components. Components are like it's like a single, it's like a little piece of your app, which you can reuse in multiple multiple times once you create one. And what's usually is done is you have your app. For example, we're going to have a ToDoApp. Here we have the header component, the add to do component, and I have a to-do list component. All of them are within the components folder here. And every single one is responsible for its own function. So for example, I have header component, which is displaying, this is the app running real time right now. And that's the header. Here's this header, and you can see it here. So the app is built from all these components, and let's talk about the component anatomy. So within a component file, which is .vue file, You have template tag where you put all your HTML for the component. Then you have script tag, which exports an object by default, where you can pass all kind of properties, methods. There's a lot that goes into it, but basically once you create a component, you want to if you're going to use it anywhere, you got to give it a name here. So I named it the header because I'm using it only once. There is like a convention. There's like a style guide for Vue, honestly, on their documentation, and they suggest that you go with certain naming conventions, which you can look into in the documentation later. Then we have a style tag, which is pretty cool thing. Once you have scoped attribute included, that means that all the styling within this tag, within style tag, is going to apply only to the component at hand. So we can use, we don't really have to give specific class names or IDs. If you have only one instance of H1 or like header or like any P tag or div tag, whatever, you can just style it however you want and make sure you have scope, and it's only going to apply to the component. This is a basic component. As you can see, we're displaying the title, the header up there. If I want to change anything here, for example, the color black, see it update. Also, to run the project, once you create the project, to run the project, you gotta, in your command line, in your terminal window, either one in VS Code or separate terminal window like I have here. All you gotta do is, there is a command. If you go to package.json file, you'll see that it has already 3 scripts built in. So if you run npm run serve, this is one used for development, for production. Then once you're ready, you want to build your assets, your app, you run build, and lint is for linting. But it's already, it lints it every time you save the file. So it comes with the ESLint pre-configured. So if you have any mistakes or any errors, it's gonna let you know either in this window or in console in the browser. So you run npm run serve. It's gonna start up the development server. It's gonna build a project. It's gonna tell you that the app is running at localhost port 8080. You go there and you're ready to build awesome stuff. So once it's ready, every time you make a change to your files, it's gonna hot reload, meaning that it's gonna auto reload for you, so you can see changes live without you having to constantly go and reload. It's like a live server extension, basically. Also make sure for extensions you have Vtur installed. It provides like syntax highlighting, snippets, emmet, support, and everything for Vue. So like if you don't have it, all your like tags and everything is going to be in one font color, and you're not going to be able to really work with that. So install Vtur. It's really helpful. Make sure you have it. All right, back to the project. So all right, let's break down the app I have here at hand. So this is the main .vue file. This is the app.vue, where you're gonna import and import all your other components that your app consists of. So here in a script tag, once you have a component created, a separate one, you can import it using the module syntax, ES6 module syntax. You say import the header from components folder and the header file, Vue file. Once you do that, you need to specify all the components that you're importing within the components property on this object you're exporting by default. So you come down here, basically just copy and paste the name. And after that, you're good to use it in your template. So same thing, you just go up here and you create a tag named exactly like you imported it. And it's gonna work. Make sure you use Pascal case, so like not camel case for your components. Make sure every word starts with a capital letter. This is the way it works, because during the build, Vue converts this to kebab case. So basically it just takes this and turns it to something similar to this. All right, yeah, this is one thing. Okay, so we've seen the header. Then let's talk about props and like how you can pass data. So here, I have a data property. Make sure it is a function, because this function is supposed to return an object with all your state that you want to keep in your app. So it's not going to be like a regular property, it's going to be a function. This basically is the same as saying data function. It's just like a short way of doing that. So make sure your data is a function and it returns an object. And here I create empty to-do list, an empty array of to-dos. And up here in my component, where I declare my component to-do list, I'm passing it as a prop. So Vue has like certain, they call directives. So for example, vbind directive means that you binding something to that tag. For example, this is a short version of saying vbind, but in the long version is just going vbind colon to-dos, whatever you want. This is like a prop. You can name it whatever you want. Then you specify what you want to pass. So in this case, we're passing this to-do list array. And you can go with a short hand version. In our to-do list component, there's a lot going on, but I'll break it down. So first, we got to receive props. So props, what it is. So you can pass whatever props you want, data you want from the parent to child. This is how it works. This is one-way flow. So the app.vue is our parent component. We have to-do list as a child in there, and we are able to pass this to-do list array to the to-do list component. And here we got to receive it by using props property on the default export default object in your script. And there is multiple ways of receiving like props. There is like bad and good ways if you, according to their style guide. So this would be like basic way of doing it. To-dos, just like an array of names of what kind of props you receive. And this is the same name that you use for on the to-do list tag where when you pass in props. So these supposed to be the same. And this is like a bad way of doing it. If you, once you read their style guide, they suggest that you at least specify the type of the prop. So in our case, it's an array. You can go further and there's more options that you can pass to this object, but we're just gonna stop on this. This is like pretty basic and enough, I guess. So you can also set a default value of it if it's never passed, but doesn't really matter right now. All right. Okay, so once we get these to-dos here, this is an array, right? We have a this is a big construction. There's a lot going on, but basically you gotta look at this lead tag. We're creating a list here, and for every lead tag, we want to create a separate representation of that to-do. So what we're doing, we're using v4 directive, which tells Vue to iterate over the to-dos array that we have here. And you can say anything you want here. You can name to-do or like item, whatever you want. It's just gonna be like, in our array is gonna be of objects. So once we pass it actually like some to-dos to it, it's gonna go over that array and take every single object entry and then we can refer to its ID, title, and completed fields. So when you use v4, Vue's gonna just make as many lead tags in our case as many entries are in the to-dos array. So for now it's empty. So it says no to-dos here. But if we go to app view and create a few objects here, let's do ID1, title, whatever, and then completed property as false. You will see it populate, you'll see it show up here. So we can pass as many as we want. We just take one. For example, we can just copy paste them as many as we want. Make sure your IDs are unique, because what Vue does is whenever you use the v4 directive, you're supposed to bind a key to it. So this is the same as vbind, but it's a shorthand version, remember. You bind a key to it, and in our case, it's a to-do ID, because we know that it is going to be a unique key for sure. This way, for Vue, it's easier to update like elements in the DOM. All right. So we have our list show up. Now each entry in our object has title field and completed field. And what we can do to make it show up, we can create another div, for example. And as its content, we can have a to-do title. So the double braces, this is the syntax you use to tell Vue that this is gonna be like some data that you have on your template, and it needs to like interpret that and like convert it to like, it's like setting divs inner HTML, for example, right? You can have expressions here, but not functions. So we can have I don't know, like ternary operator, or we can do some like two uppercase methods. This is it's going to turn everything to uppercase, right? You can use this kind of like expressions and certain function calls, but not more than that. If you want to do more manipulation to your data, just create a separate method for it and do it there. So this is the way you're gonna want to insert data inside your, for example, div tag. You can do like anything here, like math, you know, this is like pretty much any expression. So in our case, it's gonna be a title field on it to do. All right. Then we have input next to it, checkbox. And as you can see, we're binding its checked attribute. So this is the same as we bind. So we're binding the checked attribute on the input to the Boolean on the to-do completed, the completed field on the to-do. So if it's true or false, if it's false, it's going to be unchecked. If it's true, it's going to be checked, basically. So if we go back here and we set true on the second one, for example, you're going to see after I save it, it's going to update and make that checkbox checked. So whenever you have your, we receive a to-do with that property set to checked to true, that checkbox is going to be checked. Okay, and I just created some basic styling for it to line through it down here in the style tag here, for example. Once we have our input checkbox checked, the div next to it, it's gonna be the text, its text gonna be lined through. And here you also can like undo it. But of course it's not gonna persist because we have our state on the instance. So it's not coming from outside sources. Like we could do it with local storage, right? All right. The next thing is we can add, for example, I added a button to delete it to do events. Let's talk about events. So I have a button here. It's a basic button with an X for its text, inner text, and I also applied some basic styling to it. Not a lot. So when you hover over it, just turns to background white and switches the colors basically. And once you click it, this is also a shorthand for the on. So this is, we're saying that at click, emit an event of this name with this data. So this is the way how child components, remember how I told you that app, in our case, app.view is the parent component for all these components. And this is how child component can talk to the parent component. So this way we can emit an event and then later catch this event on our parent component and do whatever we want with that data that we pass to it. So in our case, what I do is we emitting an event. It can be any name. You can name it anything you want. It doesn't need to be, it doesn't have to follow any like guidelines or anything. It's all up to you. But I named it to-do delete, and I'm passing it a to-do ID. So I know which to-do I want to delete from the state. So here on the app component, we are catching that to do the same way we did at click. This is basically the same as v-on, v-on click. This is the same thing. There's a shorthand version. You just use app. It's way easier. Back in the parent component, we're catching that event by saying at to-do delete whatever is the event name that we came up with and emit it under. So we receive that event here like this. And what we do, we assign it to, in our case, the method I have created on the instance to delete the to-do. And if we go down here, below the data, below the name and components, I have my methods for the component. And here I have a delete to-do method, which takes that ID that we passed from the to-do list component. All right, so if you're familiar with higher order array methods, I'm using filter to assign. So in this functions methods, you have access to this whole object. So you can refer to-do list by using this to-do. If you're familiar with this word in JavaScript, you'll know. Basically what I'm saying is this to-do list, assign it to this to-do list filtered. With filter returns a new array, right? So when you pass, it takes a callback function, and as the parameter, it can have a to-do, the index, and the array it's running on, but we only need the to-do, so we're running it against this to-do list. And for each to-do, if its ID is not equal to the ID we passed to this function here, basically the one we need to remove, it's going to return true, meaning that it's going to keep the all the items except the one we want to delete. So it returns a new array and assigns it to our array here. So once I click the button here, look what happens. It just disappears from the state. Of course, if I refresh the page, it's going to come back because it's not pulling it from anywhere. But you get the idea. So we emit the event here, pass the to-do ID, because here we have access to that specific to-do that when we run the v4, we have access to that specific to-do, and we pass in that its ID to the parent where we can remove that to-do from the state, okay? All right, let's see what we got next. This is pretty much it for the to-do list. I also added some transition group. You can read about it in the documentation. This is basically how I'm able to create these nice transitions for whenever the item is added or removed. I'm not going to talk about it because it's already a lot, I guess. So let's just move on to another component I have here, which is add to do. So you go back to our parent component, you can see that I have the header and they follow the order. So I have the header first, then I have the add to do, and I have the to-do list. So the add to do component lets you add a new to do to the list. All I have here is a form. So within your template tags, you're allowed to have only one root element. So whether it's form or div or anything, you can't have another div in the same level. It's going to give you an error. So you got to wrap, if you want to have two like this, you're going to have to wrap all of this in another tag, for example, div. Okay, so I don't need it. The form works perfectly. So in the form, I have an input with some styling applied to it. Of course, down here in the style tag, it's also scoped. Use scope so you don't mess up all your project styling. And have a placeholder. Let's talk about vModel. vModel is another directive that lets you bind a data field you have on your object to the value of the input. So what does it mean? It's like two-way binding. So whenever I type something in here, under the hood, this variable, it gets updated with whatever I type in here. And for example, if I set something here, it's going to be like a default once you reload your page, right? So I'm leaving it empty as a default, so I can see the placeholder text. And once I type in, this text is getting saved to this variable on the component. So later, when we want to edit, and whenever I click, or whenever this the submit event happens, because I'm using the format at submit, as you can see here, the same way I'm catching this submit event, and then these are called modifiers. There's a few of them, and basically, if you took JavaScript class, we would always have to call event prevent default, so that to prevent page from reloading, for example, on forms. Here, all you gotta do is just use this modifier .prevent, and then you can like chain them. There's like different ones, but this is, in our case, I only need the prevent one, so our page is not getting reloaded every time. And the same way, once you submit the form, I'm calling the handle add to do method on the app, on the add to do component, which I have down here in my methods object. And what I'm just making a basic validation. If it's not empty, then we're creating a new to do with the ID. For it to be unique, I just use date now, because it always returns a unique number every millisecond or whatever. And then title, we're setting the title on the new to do object to this input, because we have access to, because whenever we type something, that variable gets updated, and we have access to it here. We're referring to it here, and then completed with setting to false. So basically, because you want your to do, it's a new to do, and you never finish it, right? And then after that, once we create a new to do object, same way, we emitting a new event, but this time we're emitting not from the template or not from the tag, but from the method itself. So this time we have to use this keyword. So it refers to this kind of like instance. And this is how like several of Vue built-in like methods are called. You gotta use the money sign and then emit. And with the same way, we're naming our event whatever we want, in this case to do add, and we're passing in the payload, which is the data we wanna. In our case, it's a new to do object. And of course, I'm setting the input to the empty string. So after I submit it, so it like updates the input with a empty string, and we can add a new one without having to erase the previous one. So if I don't have this, for example, if I comment it out, type something in the input and hit add, see how it remains here? Because I never updated this input because it's binded to it here. So make sure you do that. All right. And once the event gets emitted, we go back to our parent component. Same way, we're catching that event, add to do add, because that's how we named it. And we call another method already on this component called add to do. If you go down here, if we scroll, you can see that whenever I receive this event, whenever this method gets called, we're receiving that new to do payload from the child component. And what I'm doing basically is using the spread operator. I'm setting the to-dos list array on the on this component to a new array with a new to-do in it. So basically I'm spraying the previous to-do list. So all of these for example, whenever they're present, if we didn't remove any, all of these get copied into this new array. And at the end, we are adding the need to do object. Remember, it's an object. And this is an array of objects. So this new to do gets added to the state. So whenever I hit add, it gets passed to the parent. This state gets updated. And whenever this gets updated, this is the thing, the reactivity comes from this. So whenever this gets updated, Vue knows that it has to re-render or add a new item to the DOM, to your page. So I can add as many as I want, just gonna keep adding them. This is and same way you can remove any of them. And of course, after I refresh the page, it's gonna go back to default. So say we want to pull our to-dos from an API. If you're familiar with JSON placeholder API, it provides you with to-dos with a API to get a JSON of to-dos. Here I'm just making a fetch call to that API and specifying to limit it to 5. So I don't get, by default gives you like 200, it's way too many. And if you know how promises work, you chain .then to it and then receive a response, you got a call JSON method, then another then, you receive that JSON. And here I'm assigning to-do list to this JSON. And as you can see, I'm running it all inside the created hook. So this is another concept you need to understand. So whenever our component gets created or mounted on the page, it goes through certain stages of its life cycle, it's called life cycle. So here on their documentation, they have this nice diagram which represents all the stages. So first we have before create stage, then created, and created is where you wanna make your fetch calls and to get your data and set state to that data. Then we have a few more like before mount. It's before that component gets mounted on the page, then mounted. Then there's a few more, you can read about them later in the documentation. But I'm making this call in a created hook. So before it's mounted, I'm gonna have this data available for it to be displayed. So if you can see now, we don't get these default ones we have hard-coded in here. All these are coming from that API. If I put the limit here to 10, you'll see that we get, this time we get 10. And some of them come with a completed set to true. So as you remember here, the check property is binded to that completed property on the to-do. So whenever it comes with a completed set to true, it's going to be automatically set to true in your app. All right. All right, this is basic, very basic app, very basic to-do app. It's not that much going on, but you can see how but just knowing the framework, you gotta learn it once, and then you are able to create really awesome stuff without having to write a lot of boilerplate code like document query selector or whatever. That makes it easier, and then it's more declarative. All right, so I think this is all to the app. This is the place where you're gonna have a lot of questions and I wanna answer them. So if you have a question, please ask me a question. Something was unclear, I'm happy to help you get it cleared out. Any questions? You can use the chat to ask me a question, or you can raise the hand and we'll go from there. I'll give you a few seconds.
Eli, it's Bruce. I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
What are some of the resources that you use to learn Vue?
Awesome question. So documentation is a great one. So Vue.js.org, if you go to learn and you go to guide, they have a pretty cool guide to help you explain everything in here, like everything. And then they also have a repo called Awesome Vue, where they have collected all the stuff related to Vue.js. So there's like podcasts, YouTube channels, job portal, books, examples, tutorials, everything you ever want to learn about Vue. Component libraries like UI components, I don't know, you name it, other frameworks that build on top of Vue. There is a lot. Also, what I used to get started with Vue, I went through Vue School. Here you can see the external resources. They have Vue School listed. They have a few free courses. So if you go to their courses page, you can select free ones, and all the free ones are pretty awesome in terms that it gets you familiar and going with Vue relatively fast. They're very well done, and I would recommend you start with these if you want to get started with Vue. Vue router, which I didn't talk, which is covered here, you can do it. It's a more of an intermediate topic. Then components fundamentals, how components work, testing fundamentals, Vue.js fundamentals, UX, which is a state managing like tool built on top of Vue for bigger applications. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Eli. I have one more. I'm going to sneak one more in there. What were some of the things that challenged you the most, that caused you the most, like if you had to go back and relearn that particular thing again in Vue, what was it that took a little bit more work?
Just understanding the syntax, like the way it works, this might seem like a lot, the default, like the script, everything you want to make happen in a script tag, this default object, like all these like properties like components, data, methods. Like at first it was hard to understand where you need to put everything to make it work. But once you go over that Vue School or other tutorials, it starts to make sense. And also the documentation is awesome. So if you need more in-depth look into it, of course, documentation is the place to go. All right. See the question here. How send to another component data, add example props and function. How communicate components. So if I understand right, you want to see how you can communicate between other components, I guess. Okay, so this is the same way. So for example, I'm trying to think of a case where you would want to do it. So for example, in our case, we have a main state and our parent, where like whenever I want to add a to-do, which is a separate component, separate child component on the same level with a to-do list, I'm just changing the state here and it gets updated automatically on the to-do list. this is still child to parent communication. But like if you want one component to talk to another, it's probably like the same way. So like you would emit an event, and then on your parent component, you would on receive, you could like, it's a good question, dude. Like, I'm trying to understand where would you need it, and like how you want to make it work. Okay, what is emit? So emit is a built-in Vue method that lets you create events. So it's like add event listener on the under the hood, and you creating the event with the name you want, and then the second argument would be the payload you want to pass. So like in our case, we did, for example, a ToDoApp when we wanted to delete one. So when you want to emit an event from within the template, you don't need to use the this keyword, because you have direct access to it here. But when you are in your script and you want to run it from a method, like we did add to do, for example, you gotta specify, you gotta make sure you use this keyword so it has access to that method. Redux in Vue example storage. So there's no Redux for Vue. Redux is for React. Vue has something similar called Vuex. If you go to Vue School, again, courses, they have a free course on Vuex. It's a very good course. It helped me understand. It tagged as advanced, but I would recommend starting with all the beginning ones and kind of work your way up. But Vuex is pretty much the Redux for Vue. How you use server-side rendering in Vue. Server-side rendering, Nuxt.js is another framework on top of Vue. It comes with that feature built into it, and it does all of it for you. If you watch this Nuxt.js fundamentals, you will understand how to make it work. All right. Any other questions?
There's another question there, Eli.
TypeScript. Yeah, Vue comes with TypeScript support. Whenever you create a new project, for example, or also I didn't talk about the graphic GUI that Vue now has. So we go to the terminal and we run, first of all, I gotta get into that. And we run Vue, I think it's GUI. Oh, UI, Vue UI, never mind, Vue UI. It's gonna open up a new tab in your browser where you can see, so you like graphical user interface for the Vue. You can do a lot from here, to be honest. So for example, this is our app here. You select your app. There is a project manager. This is our current app. Never mind. This is not the app. There's some other app I try to do. But okay, let's go to Vue Project Manager. Here we can import another one. So if I go to my app, I'm gonna do import this folder, understood. Now we have it here. So we can go to the plugins, and here it's pretty easy to add new plugins to your application. Right now, by default, we have Vue CLI plugin, Babel, and ESLint. If you want to add another plugin, for example, TypeScript, right? Here's actually, it is on the list. So I just click TypeScript, say install, and this user interface is just going to do everything for you. You don't have to run any commands in your terminal or anything. And just like that, you're going to have TypeScript added. I'm not sure, maybe there is more configuration you're going to have to do. Just read the documentation. I haven't tried using TypeScript with Vue yet, but I'm pretty sure it's covered in the documentation. How to integrate? Okay, if wanting to learn Vue from Vue School, which course would you recommend? From Vue School or all the free ones? Just go through all the free ones. The material design, okay, yes, this is one thing I was going to mention as well. So Vue has a lot of UI libraries built for it. So like Bootstrap, Vue Bootstrap. If you're familiar with Bootstrap, it's just the same thing, but for Vue with its own like tags and everything. And then you have Vuetify, which I like. And Vuetify has its own pretty extensive documentation, and this is pretty much the answer to your question. The answer to your question: how do you make material design in Vue? There's other material design libraries, I guess, for Vue. This is the one I used, and I really liked. A lot of documentation as well, and tutorials online. If you could get started, you're just going to be taken to their docs, and you can see how you can do it. Also see, this is the way you would add Vuetify. The same way you can do is through the graphic user interface. If you look for a Vue plugin, you can just add it from there. For Vuetify, I mean, sorry. Vuetify. Where? See, to be honest, I don't know if the search worked. Yeah, here. This is the one. You would just install it and just get started with it.
I think you got another question in the chat.
Yeah, I see. Where can I find best practice and code design? I would recommend starting with their style guide. On Vue.js docs, they have a style guide. If you can go access it through, let's see. Yeah, under learn, there's a style guide link. They cover a lot of rules. They have, I think, 4 or like 3, never mind, 4 categories for like by priority. It's like essential ones and then whatever they recommend. If you go through all of this, they give you good examples of what's bad and what's good and how to do it right. Airbnb style. So you're talking about ESLint, I guess. And for ESLint, you can have different like style configurations you want to follow, and Airbnb is one among like, I think there's standard.js and then Google or something like that. I'm not sure. But whenever you create a project, if you don't go for default, so let's see here. I'm gonna stop this server, and if I want to create a new project from scratch, and instead of going for default, I'm gonna go for manually select features, hit enter. Here you can select, you can select the TypeScript, UX, router, preprocessors like Sass, add unit test into it. And by hitting space. If you want to select something, you just hit space. Select it, and then you hit enter to continue. And here's asking for class style component syntax. This is something I didn't cover. It's more of an advanced, I guess. And then if you want to use Babel, hit yes. And here, when it comes to a linter or formatter config, you can pick whichever you want. So Airbnb, standard, Preter. I hope I answered your question. Not sure about that, the Cypress and E2E testing. This is my first year learning about web development, so I've never done much of the testing yet. Can't answer that question. Maybe Bruce can.
No, I'm here to learn, so I can't answer that one. But, we will be making the video and the code base available after the session's over, and you'll all get emailed that information. Sorry I couldn't answer that, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I guess you're going to have to Google that one. Any other ones?
Well, if everyone can give Eli a little set of virtual applause using the Zoom controls, that would be wonderful. So Eli, thanks for presenting to us all today. I think you may have another question. Oh, there's a thank you from Pixel. I'm not sure.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming. I really enjoyed doing this one. It's my first teaching session ever. Don't judge me too much. And I appreciate you all for coming and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Eli.
Yeah, hit me up on Slack or I guess Slack. And if you have any more questions on resources or everything, I'll be happy to help you.
Thank you, Eli.
That was good. Thanks, Eli.
Good luck with getting started with Vue.